Today on Rebel Then King, we are building out an adventuring party using only Thaumaturges. Welcome, adventurers. I am very excited to build out this party of Thaumaturges because it is one of my favorite classes. But I suppose, first things first, yes, I do have a mustache right now. No, I normally do not. In fact, this is the first time in my life I have ever had one, so leave me a comment and let me know what you think. I did grow this for a costume contest. It is going to be shaven off tomorrow, but I suppose if I get enough comments on this video, maybe if I get this video to like 1,500 views, which is more than these Oops All videos tend to do, maybe I'll share a picture of what the costume was, but if you've got a guess, let me know about that too. Anyway, back to Thaumaturges. I love this class because it is charisma-based, yet it is a fantastic martial that adds a ton of damage to its strikes. No, it is never going to have the full attack accuracy of other martial classes because it is not dex or strength-based, but I think that is okay, and it is offset by the huge amounts of static damage and ability to provoke weaknesses with their strikes. So I think you're a tiny bit less accurate, but you deal a lot more damage. I think that is a great pairing. Another really cool thing about this class and why I think it is going to work well as a singular class for a party is it kind of seems like a lot of the implements, the subclasses, were somewhat modeled after other core classes in the system. The amulet offers protection, a lot like a champion. The weapon gives you a reactive strike or an attack of opportunity, and that is very fighter-like. So there's a lot of diversity in there. I think this is going to be a very successful party. I have it built out. Let's start where I always start, with the hammer. For this hammer, I went with an ancestry that I have not actually used before in the Tanuki. I did it because, well, this is sort of how I learn about new ancestries and feats and everything in the game, is by theory crafting builds, so that's what I did. Another good thing about the Tanuki is it is Constitution and Charisma boosted, which is great for an upfront fighter with the con, and a Thaumaturge who uses Charisma as their key ability score, and then it has a free boost, which is, perfect. We're going to go with Strength, and I don't really care about the Wisdom all that much. I went with the Virtuous Tanuki because you gain poison resistance equal to half your level, minimum 1. You can eat and drink things when you're sickened. And I believe this will apply to, spoiler alert, we'll have a Chalice Thaumaturge. You'll be able to sip and drink from the chalice even when sickened, which is huge. The Ancestry feat is an awesome name, first of all, just so cool. Scorched on the Crackling Mountain. Your flat check to remove persistent fire damage is DC 10 instead of DC 15, which can be reduced to 5 with appropriate assistance. So almost a gimme at that point. The first time each day you would be reduced to 0 hit points by a fire effect. You avoid being knocked out and remain at 1 hit point, and your wounded condition increases by 1. So it's a little conditional, but fire damage has to be the most common type of elemental damage, so this will come up, and again, the name is just so fun. For the background, I went with Warrior because, well, this is going to be my hammer. My weapon, Thaumaturge Warrior, makes sense, and it does grant Intimidating Glare, which pairs super well with the fact that, well, you've got a charisma-based class here. So it's going to be good at intimidation. That is a great third action for you to have. As far as the ability scores, maxed out charisma, went +3 for my attacks and damage, a bit of dex to help out my AC, and I did offset that wisdom penalty, so I have +0 wisdom. For the implement, I went with the weapon. Duh. Gain an attack of opportunity. That's really what you get out of this weapon implement, and that is a fantastic thing to have in the front line. I mean, getting in an extra attack as a reaction at no multiple attack penalty is huge. Almost inevitably, every 10, 15 sessions or so, you're even going to kill a creature with your reaction, which feels fantastic. Talking about, turning the tides of a battle, a creature is about to move and go after someone else, and no, you just hit it in the back and it's done. For the feat, I went with diverse lore, just helping recall knowledge abilities. As far as the actual weapon for this character, I did go with a Warhammer because it is a D8. Remember, one small downside of the Thaumaturge is you need to use one-handed weapons. It is a little interesting. Usually, this states that for a Thaumaturge, you need to hold your implement in one hand and your weapon in the other. In this case, your weapon is your implement, but even then, you can choose only a one-handed weapon as an implement. So that is something to keep in mind. But still, D8 plus your 3 strength plus 2, just because you are holding your weapon and you have implement's empowerment active by holding your implement and weapon at the same time. And then if you are using exploit vulnerability, and as long as you are failing, as long as you're not critically failing, I guess I should say, you're going to at least be able to apply your personal antithesis, which is another 2 points of damage. So realistically, you're going to be doing a D8 plus 3 strength plus 2 plus 2. D8 plus 7. That is not bad. And if you succeed and you find some actual weaknesses on the creature, if they have any, you could do even more damage than that, which is just amazing. For the armor, I went with breastplate. That does give me my max 18 AC. For skills, intimidation, of course, with intimidate and glare. Athletics to use shove, which the hammer has. And then I did not round out the rest of my skills. I don't know that it matters too much. This is not the skill player on the team. So I might even leave that blank and just come back and round it out later. On to the next build, though. I'm going with an ambassador/professional Thaumaturge. All Thaumaturges are kind of ambassadors because they are charisma-based, but this one is going to have just a little bit more going on. It is a human because I am going to cheese skills a little bit with this build. That is why I am calling it a professional. So skilled human, natural skill. I am cheesing that. I admit it, even though I don't want to. I think as long as I'm not doing a ton of ancestry stuff and specific human extra general training on every single build, we're still getting a lot out of the class itself, which is the point of these videos. For the background, I went with Barrister, which grants group impression. Great thing for an ambassador to have. For the implement, I went with Regalia. You gain a +1 circumstance bonus to deception, diplomacy, and intimidation checks. Hello, ambassador. Allies who can see you can use Follow the Expert to follow you, even if you're only trained in a skill and not an expert. When they do, the circumstance bonus they gain from the Follow the Expert is +1. So this is kind of professional-like. This is why this is the ambassador/professional. Also, when you are holding your Regalia, you gain an inspiring aura that stokes the courage of you and all allies in a 15-foot emanation who can see you, granting them a +1 status bonus to saving throws against fear, a bit of a team buff. At the end of your turn, at the same time you would reduce your frightened value by 1, you reduce the frightened value of all allies within your inspiring aura by 1. That is pretty huge. For the feat, I went with diverse lore again here, bolstering your recall knowledge abilities. For the professional, that is what you want to be doing a lot. For the weapon, I went with a battle axe because it's brutal and awesome. Armor, breastplate, again, gonna kind of repeat that. And skills, trained in almost anything. So this is a character that is going to be able to talk. And remember, it's not a +7, it is a +8 due to the Regalia. In any situation, to multiple people with group impression, can intimidate people, and then kind of inspires their allies around them. Very cool build. On to a cannon build. Now, I typically think of Thaumaturges as being melee combatants for some reason, but they don't have to be. You can make a very good cannon with a Thaumaturge as well. This is a goblin because goblins have boost to dexterity and charisma. We're going to use that dexterity for our ranged attacks here. The background is a street urchin, which we'll talk about in a second. I should first do my heritage and ancestry feat. The Heritage, the Tree Dweller Goblin, as long as you are in a forest or jungle, you gain a +2 circumstance bonus to stealth checks to hide and sneak, survival checks to subsist, and your survival DC to cover tracks. I'm going to adjust the training on this a little bit, but I also went with very sneaky for more stealth boost. This is going to be a stealthy character because it is our dex-based ranged character. Need a little bit of synergy there. The background is a street urchin that grants you the pickpocket feat, and it kind of goes along with just the, sneaky ancestry feat. And again, because we are dex-based, we're going to be leaning to thievery, so we want a thievery feat. The ability scores. Maxed out charisma again, secondary max of dexterity this time, and then a strength because I do need a little bit of strength to offset the armor penalty for the studded leather that this character is going to wear. The implement. I went with wand. Now, I feel like the wand is maybe the weakest of the implements because it doesn't actually work well with your other Thaumaturge abilities. The wand gives you a 2-action save-based, not attack. It is not a strike, but it is. It's called Fling Magic is what you do with the wand, and you don't get to apply your implement's empowerment nor the benefits of exploit vulnerability to that damage because it is not a capital S strike. It is not a strike action, which is what is specified for those abilities. But it does pair well with making a 2-action ranged save-based ability that does not have the attack trait, and then using a weapon that does require an attack, but at no multiple attack penalty because this Fling Magic is not an attack. So that is what we're going to kind of do here. I'm going to skip ahead then to talk about the weapon. I did give this the Air Repeater is the name of the weapon, which holds 3 rounds with a reload of 0. So you would want to make sure it's loaded before combat. And then in theory, you could 2 actions, Fling Magic with the wand, then 1 action to shoot. And you do get to apply that extra damage from Implement's Empowerment with this. And you're kind of just being an auto turret, providing a good deal of range damage, hopefully from safety. For the feat, I went with Scroll Thaumaturgy to go along with the wand theme here. You can access and use scrolls as the Thaumaturge, so you can lean more into using magic. And then the armor, as I said earlier, is studded leather because we are dex-based. And I went heavy into thievery and stealth, though I will make one change. I'm going to drop crafting and go instead with survival, even though low wisdom, because street urchin has some survival benefits. So that's what we're doing. We are already on to the last Thaumaturge build here. This is going to be my healer. It is a kobold because they have dex and charisma boosts, but no wisdom flaw, which is important because this is going to be our healer, both magical or through their implement and with traditional treat wounds and everything. So we don't want that wisdom boost that the goblin has, but we do want the dexterity and charisma boost here. I went with the dragon scaled kobold for a little bit of extra hit points. And I went with the ancestry feat cringe because, again, don't die. As the healer, don't die. Though this character, that's the nice thing about playing martial all classes is 18 AC pretty much across the board and like 17 plus hit points. So it's not like as terrifying as it is, building like the party of witches, I think, was just like, some 14 and 15 ACs and like 12 and 13 hit points. That's kind of scary. That is looking at getting wiped out pretty easily. Not the case here. Much more survivable. For the background on this healer, I went with Acolyte because it plays well with the wisdom and religion training. If you roll a critical failure at a religion check to decipher writing of a religious nature or to recall knowledge about the tenets of faiths, you gain a failure instead. When attempting to recall knowledge about the tenets of your own faith, if you roll a failure, you get a success instead. And if you roll a success, you get a... So it boosts your checks. Very cool. And again, when you have a party of only one class like this, and especially a class that only can use one key ability score. It's important to pick your secondary ability scores, like I did with wisdom here, and then lean into those skills associated with those ability scores. For the implement, I went with the chalice for healing. Now, this is a very cool implement. You can sip from it, which is one action, for temporary hit points. And I should say, you can drink from it or feed its liquid to an ally. So it's an action for either you or to administer to someone else. Sip grants the drinker an amount of temporary hit points equal to 2 plus half your level. Awesome. But you can also drain the chalice to heal the drinker 3 hit points for each level you have. So it's pretty minor healing, but it's not nothing. For the feat here, I went with Root to Life, which is a little more healing, or at least stabilizing. So you place a small plant or similar symbol on an adjacent dying creature, immediately stabilizing them. The creature is no longer dying and is instead unconscious at 0 hit points. If you spend 2 actions instead of 1, you empower the act further by uttering a quick folk blessing to chase away ongoing pain, adding the auditory trait to the action. When you do so, attempt flat checks to remove each source of persistent damage, which can be huge because, man, one of the most deadly things in this game is going through the dying condition with persistent damage, because you can get healed and come out of dying and gain the wounded condition, and then that persistent damage knocks you right back down. And then you don't get healed again, and then you take more persistent damage while already unconscious, which advances wounded. That is probably the most common way for PCs to die, other than maybe, being crit to 0 hit points or less, and then having 2 bad rolls or 1 critical failure roll after that on your flat check. So this is, it's not the huge bursts of healing like a cleric has, but it is a ton of ongoing temporary hit points, some healing abilities, and then of course you are going to be trained in medicine and nature and your wisdom skills, and you're going to use that medicine for healing with traditional treat wounds in between combat. The weapon, I went with Whip because it's finesse and reach. You're going to be dex based, allowing this character to avoid the front line to stay alive as the healer. Armor, studded leather, and then, like I said, skills, wisdom, based skills like medicine, religion, survival. What do I think of this party? It's going to be, it's just going to be fun because you are all charisma based. I love it. I think you are going to do tons of damage because you have some serious upfront combatants, a good ranged build, and then sort of this mid-range support. And remember, sure, you're only dealing a D6 or D8 with a lot of your weapons, or D4, I think, even in some cases, but that's plus and then you add your strength to it. And then 2 points. And then that does scale up later with Implement's Empowerment. And then Exploit Vulnerability. You are going to rock your way through, resistances and things like that, just because you're going to do so much damage with each individual character in this party. You have all the positions covered. I mean, I think I cannot spell positions today, apparently. You have, or covered. No, covered was right. Anyway, you have a legit hammer, a legit cannon, a legit, pseudo-legit healer, I will say, and a very legit ambassador and professional. So what else could you ask for? As far as the bad, I mean, well, actually, I was going to say you don't really have magic, but you do. That's going back in the good. You've even got some magic ability. Not a ton, but I mean, if you need to cast a particular spell, like you're going to know you need to do underwater breathing, for example, well, you can buy those scrolls and use them as this martial party. That is not something that other martial parties are going to be able to do. That is amazing. As far as the bad goes, you might suffer if you are fighting a type of monster that has very high AC and low HP, which is sort of the way the balance tends to go. Because you are none of you use dexterity or strength as your key ability score, you don't have full attack accuracy. So that is a bad. I don't think it's a very big deal. You know, you're still +3, +4 would be nice, but you know, that does put you 3 points behind a fighter and 1 point behind every other martial, so that is something to consider. So overall, I think this party is going to do an absolutely fantastic job. I think it's very easy to imagine this party adventuring together. They could be a bunch of collectors of old trinkets and things who meet up and maybe even swap some of their implements and then start adventuring together. You know, compared to something like a party of just witches who all use a different patron, this party seems like it actually fits together in terms of its backstory, in addition to all of the abilities working very well together. I think it's going to be a great party. It's going to be a ridiculous party. So let me know if you have tried anything like this.